Good to be with you all. It's Tuesday, March 24, and we've got, as usual, some excellent questions that have been sent in ahead of time. We might have time for some live questions, so please don't hesitate to send those in during the course of the chat. First question. First question's a little unusual, actually. I've been listening to more of the video chat archives, and in one of them you made a comparison to some of the things that we do in raising children to what we do in training a dog. My hubby and I don't have children at this point, but we do have a 3-year-old beagle. When I think about how we discipline our dog, I get concerned about our future parenting skills. Beagles are known for being naughty, and I think we sometimes don't deal well with ours, so I wonder if we'll be good parents. I never thought about that. Get a pet, and if you're lousy with your pet, don't get children. So my question is there any way that my parent and I can parent our dog in preparation for real parenthood someday? So there are several questions here, at least a couple. Are there some similarities between parenting a pet and parenting a child? Yes, and to check that out, I called a very good friend of mine, Suzanne Graff, who is a supervisor of a number of other veterinarians running a veterinary clinic, just to check this out with her, because although I'm pretty good with raising children, and although we've had pets, I'm not an expert at training animals, so I wanted to run my thoughts by her just to be sure I wasn't getting this wrong, and she said yes about my impressions, so I just wanted to be sure. There are a lot of similarities. Both children and pets require absolute consistency in raising them. It is just confusing for both children and pets when we behave one way in a circumstance and then 5 minutes later behave another way, and then the next day behave another way, and then another way. I mean, talk about confusing, and we do this with our kids constantly. So, for example, we tell our children, clean your room or I will blank. And then what happens is, if they clean the room or they don't, sometimes we do what we say and sometimes we don't, or we say, don't do a thing. And then when they do that thing, sometimes we get up from the couch and sometimes we don't. And, the world that we create for our children is just unpredictable. It's chaotic. And it's because we are not predictable. So being consistent is just utterly required. When you see these animals on television who do these tricks, these horses who do these incredible things, these dogs who perform tricks, they do that because their training is metronomically consistent. I mean, they do the same thing over and over with these animals. And you have to do that with your children, or they just don't get it. The next principle that I suggested with children, and just checked it out with her, is that you also have to be firm. And that partly goes along with consistent. When you tell a child this is what we're going to do, you can't be you can't demonstrate give. When you tell a child, if you don't do a thing, then we're going to do this. Then you can't say, well, okay, this time because, you were tired. Well, no, here are the rules. It's kind of like when you tell a child, if your grade point isn't 3.0, then, you can't have your iPod back. And then the child comes back and says, well, it was 297. Well, let's see. That wouldn't be 3.0 then, would it? No, it isn't. And yet parents give in all the time. Consistent, firm, and then we have to be loving, as in not angry. And it was interesting to hear my veterinary friend confirm that. As soon as you become angry, as in violent hitting with an animal, she says, you're done. They just shut down. Animals feel a lack of love just like children do. She says when you become angry with an animal and start venting on them, she said, you're done. The training's finished. Same with a kid. So we need to love and teach animals in the same way that we need to love and teach kids. Now the difference with children and pets is that with pets respond very well to being praised, rewarded with treats, food, so on. Whereas with children, if you reward them with praise and food and so on, then what will happen is they'll begin to do the thing just for the reward rather than for the intrinsic rightness and goodness and sense of responsibility of the thing. And that's not a good thing with kids. And you want to read more about that in reading Real Love and Parenting. And some animals actually respond well in learning a task, a particular task, to punishment. Not to anger, but to punishment. Some of those great little tricks that you see those stallions perform are learned in response to a cattle prod up their butts. So I don't recommend that. Although it has occurred to me on more than one occasion. But I couldn't find it in the child training section in Amazon to get a cattle prod. But punishing children is not a way to train them. But apparently it does work, apparently though, only with certain species of animals. With, like, for example, killer whales. They do not punish killer whales. They do not punish dolphins. Certain animals are never punished, whereas some others are punished, but only in certain specific ways and under certain very specific conditions. So they've learned that it only works in, very exacting conditions. And to answer your other question, raising a pet, although learning to raise a pet consistently and firmly and lovingly, will never prepare you for what's going to happen when you've got a kid. I mean, I've got a good friend who waited to have his first child, he and his wife, till he was 40 years old. Was familiar with the real love principles, raised several pets successfully, and then he had a child. And when this child grew to be, 4 or 5 years old, he called me one day and he said, I thought I was a reasonably prepared adult human being. By now he's like 45 years old. So he's a 45-year-old man. He's done all these things in life, been successful at many things, and he said, I was absolutely unprepared for this little child. So, there's just really no way to prepare for a kid until the kid's there. But then I do suggest that you read Real Love and Parenting, maybe memorize it, and then you have the advantage of consulting with, on a frequent basis, other people who are experienced in real love, especially people who are experienced in real love parenting. It really does take a lot of love and support to raise a kid. It's a tough thing. It's a job that absolutely never goes away. Little kids are just constantly demanding. And it's not like, I hear the phrase that people say that little children are constantly testing their boundaries. They're not that clever. That's a lie. Little kids don't sit around and go, let me think. I'm going to test my boundaries today. That's psychological poop. They don't do that. Little kids are just constantly exploring what's fun and exciting. And in the process, we find that trying. It's difficult because we'd rather have things just kind of, calm and easy and ordered. But in many respects, little kids are like water. We like nice and ordered and easy containers. And let me tell you, sweetie, if there is the slightest leak in the container of your life, your child will find the leak. Your kid will be the water, and you will find many opportunities to be patching leaks in your bucket. And your first opportunity, actually the best opportunity that you'll find to learn to love your child, even better than learning to love a pet, is learning to love your partner. So learn to be a great husband or wife first, and that will prepare you to love your child better than anything else you do. By far. No kidding. Here's somebody who says, I'm usually a person who keeps on top of things. However, more recently, I've noticed that I'm increasingly unmotivated to do things at work. I find myself cutting corners when it comes to preparing my lessons, I'm a school teacher, or failing to keep up with tasks that I should be doing, like entering data or marking student work, or getting my work folders organized. I can't seem to motivate myself. Today, again, I left my laptop at work, which has all my work on it, in an insecure place because I was being scatterbrained. Although I did this recently, I still have not backed up all my work. If it's not there when I go in tomorrow, if it's been stolen, I am up the proverbial creek. Why do I do this? I then create more stress for myself. I'm usually very motivated, but somehow, with some things, I just can't get going. What's the solution? This is also sort of related to my earlier question that I asked on another week, which is that my school is a little slack and it seems that other people get away with not doing their jobs. When they should be sharing information, the teachers, with each other, they don't, while I do tend to share my lesson plans with other teachers. It's hard to find the incentive to do my job properly. So I can remember your question from before, that when you first started teaching, that you had hoped that teaching would be this kind of idyllic nirvana, that all teachers would have as a goal raising these loving children, that they would have their hearts open, that they would want to teach the children for their benefit, that they would gladly share everything that they knew with all the other teachers, that everybody would be one great big happy family, they would be kind and sharing, and everybody would get together at lunch hour and sing Kumbaya. Well, then you discover that it was not like that. Now, it's very nice, it's actually sweet, that you had hoped that it would be like that. It would be wonderful if all teachers had that as their ideal. But you discovered that teachers could be grouchy, snotty, selfish, competitive, withholding, not share with each other, in fact, intentionally withhold lesson plans from each other, engage in a game of one-upmanship, and it was quite a disillusion to you. So then it occurred to you, well then, do I really want to share my lesson plans with other teachers? So here you were wanting to play real love with the other teachers and with the students, and you discover that everybody else is playing imitation love and getting and protecting behaviors, which is playing on what I call the field of death. Well, this sense of disillusionment, this sense of betrayal is very disappointing. And once you discover that people are not being loving, it's not as fun to play the game of imitation love on the field of death. And the motivation to go and to compete and to keep score and to keep track of points and to play the game the way everybody else plays it is not as great. And so part of you is like going, why bother? Why try as hard to achieve goals that are not nearly as lofty as you once set for yourself? Well, so what I'm suggesting is, don't give in to this field of death that everybody else plays on. Don't set your goals lower. Don't set your standards lower. All by yourself, you can still play the better game. You can really do that. Rent the movie, Freedom Riders. Rent the movie, Dead Poets Society. Now, it is a fact that when you're a teacher like that, When you teach on a higher plane, it's very often true that others don't support you. It's very often true that sometimes even other teachers resent you. But, you know, there's something about being a pioneer that sometimes annoys people, but it inspires your students. And it sure makes life exciting and fun for you. So don't give up. Feel the motivation not from the praise that you get from other people, because you often won't. Often they won't even understand what you're doing. When you live an idealistic life, often people will look at you kind of, out of the corner of their eye going, what is she doing? They won't get you. Well, I understand that better than you might think. If we don't do things for the truly idealistically right reason, in the end, we're doing it for imitation love anyway, and we're going to lose because imitation love wears off. So don't give up, sweetie. Don't do it. And you'll end up being happy. Just be willing to give up the temporary thrill of imitation love, and you'll get your motivation back. Just honestly look at what your motivation is. If you're looking for the praise of other people, you're going to lose. If you're looking for the temporary power of other people to pat you on the back and do what you want, you're going to lose anyway. So do it for the right reasons, and you'll end up being happy in the long run. Here's a writer who says, this morning, I was nearly hit by a reckless speeding driver. I recognized him as the 20-year-old son of someone that I know. I called the police, and they told me that the only thing they could do was send a letter to the registered owner or owners of the car, which would be his mother and stepfather. And I've been through that kind of thing before, and that's because the police weren't there. They didn't see it, and so they can't charge the kid. They can only do that if they actually witnessed it. His mother is so controlling that compared to her, I look like a saint. I know that the boy is desperately empty and medicating his pain, which is very sweet of you to recognize. That's exactly why people drive like that. I used to drive like a crazy person all the time, and I did it because it gave me a sense of power. When I drove around people and past people and in my mind right over them and through them, for a minute, it made me feel less helpless. It made me feel more powerful. It didn't work for very long, but it made me feel better for a minute. And that's all this 20-year-old kid was doing. And I did it for a long time. So your question is, what is the most loving thing to do? And is it any of my business? Let's do the second thing. Is it any of your business? Yeah, it's your business. If you've got somebody out there on the road who is driving a 3,500-pound death machine in a way that could end up, killing you and your children, yeah, it's your business. What's the loving thing to do? Well, it would be unloving to say nothing. Because you say nothing, and here's this kid out there speeding around the roads, and then you read that, 2 days later, this kid, runs down some 4-year-old in a crosswalk, and you're going, whoa, what if I'd said something? So it's almost like, how can you not? Often we think, well, anything harsh, anything direct, anything pointed is unloving. But that's not true. Like, for example, let's say that I have a child who's drinking. Sometimes the loving thing to do is to involuntarily commit that child to a alcohol and drug treatment center for a month. Have them thrown into the treatment center in chains if necessary, because that's the loving thing to do. Because the more unloving thing to do is to say nothing. Now, the child would love that, and see, that's what's confusing. The child would love it. And we think just because the child would love it, that would be loving. No. Just because somebody says, I would love it, we think that means love, and it doesn't. Unconditional love means genuinely caring about their real happiness, which means they have to be loved, loving, and responsible. Well, how can somebody feel loved, be loving, and act responsibly when they're screaming around the roads or driving drunk? So just because a child would love it because I do nothing doesn't mean I should. So if the most unloving thing would be to do nothing, not commit the child to a drug treatment center, and then what happens? 3 days later, 14 days later, a month later, this child's driving drunk and is wrapped around a tree, dead. Same with this kid that you saw. So you write the police, or you call the police, and you say, look, I saw this kid. He was driving crazily. And so what they do is they write a letter to the owner of the car. Then the kid's out driving again 2 weeks later, and somebody else spots him, and they report him. Another letter goes out. Then another letter. Then he's pulled over by the police, and the police go to give him a warning. But they call into headquarters, and it turns out that this kid's had 3 letters written about him. And the police go, let me think. We could give him a warning, but here are 3 unrelated letters that have been written as a result of 3 reports from unrelated citizens. Let's see. Should we give him a warning? I don't think so. So we're going to charge him. So, no, it's really kind of a citizen's duty to say something, even though you know that his mother's then going to be controlling and harsh. It's about protecting the rest of us out here who are going to be on the roads with this crazy boy. It's loving to him and it's loving to the rest of us. This writer says, my mother has been ill lately, and when I saw her for dinner, she also seemed tired and distracted. 2 days later, I left her a voicemail saying that it was good to see her, and I thanked her for dinner and wanted to be sure that she got home all right. Then I said, you seem tired, so I'm checking on you. Hope you feel good. And then I said, love you and goodbye. Seems perfectly innocent, doesn't it? Wrong. She called back and left me a voice message saying that she got my phone message and it hurt her feelings. Now get this message. You seem tired. I'm checking on you. Hope you feel good. I love you. Goodbye. Seems so innocent. So let me continue with what you're saying here. It hurt her feelings. She was upset with me, and I needed to call her so we could talk about it. She said when I said that she looked tired, it really upset her. I felt sad after hearing her voicemail because it reminded me of the old feelings of my being blamed for something. It was painful. So you got to be wondering, how in the world could my mother be upset over such an innocent comment, right? She's obviously being such a huge victim. How could this bother her? But see, victims don't like to be told that there's anything wrong with them. Now, this is true with many victims. Now, victims don't mind whining that everything's wrong with them. That's fine. But don't ever tell a victim that something's wrong with them. They like to be in charge of their own victim agenda. So, in her mind, what she heard was, what? How dare you? You're telling me that I look tired, and of course then that would translate into I look old, I look weak, I look sick, there's something wrong with me, what are you saying? What are you accusing me of? It would go on and on in her head of what you're telling her, that there's something wrong with her. They like to present their own complaints, which of course is fine. Now, here's the irony with a victim. You can't do anything right. So if you say, you're looking tired, that's wrong. If you don't say anything about how they look, that's also wrong. So with victims, it's too much or it's too little. Everything is wrong. It just never stops with a victim. Then you continue. This time, though, I saw clearly that my mother made the choice to see something negative in my voicemail and get upset. when she could have chosen to see that we had just had some quality time together and that I was reaching out to her. Good for you. So it wasn't your fault. So as soon as you see that, you're free. See, victims spend their entire lives fishing with multi-pronged hooks. Constant. It just never stops. They're constantly, it's like they have a whole bag of lines with hooks on them, and they're swinging them around their head all the time trying to snare people. They just love it. And they hook everybody they can, in the face, in the eyes, and every part of the body they can, and then they reel them in. And as soon as you realize that it's not your fault, you're free, because the hooks can't sink in. And that's the victim's entire job, is hooking people. So you just refuse. You just go, oh, no thank you. You just turn into the Teflon person, and the hooks just slide off. It's not that you don't care about her, but you don't get involved in the game. Then you continue. When I spoke to her, I told her I was sorry she felt that way, but then when I said she seemed tired, my intention was out of concern, since she'd been ill lately. I should have said that I was sorry. Oh, should I have said that I was sorry she felt that way? You know, I'm not going to get into what you should or shouldn't have said, but you don't have to be sorry for any choice that she made. She chose to feel this way. So you said it, it's over with. But just for the future, you really don't ever have to say that. Oh, Mom, I'm sorry that you had nothing to apologize for. And you didn't even have to say, I'm sorry you felt that way. No, that was her choice to feel that way. That's what victims want. So you could, for example, have said, I mentioned it only because I cared about you. Why did you think I mentioned it? So put the ball back in her court. Why did you think I would mention it? Make her say it. Make her say it, because there's only two choices. Let's see. I either cared about you or I mentioned it because I was what? Attacking you? Make her say the absurd. So Mom, so are you suggesting that I mentioned that you were tired because I was trying to outright tell you that you looked old? Because I do this with victims all the time. I say there's only two ways to go here. Either I was concerned about you or I was trying to attack you and tell you that you looked old and tired. Does that make sense to you? And then sometimes I actually laugh so that they can see how crazy that sounds. State the truth. And then you just tell her. So are you clear that I had no malice here, that I didn't mean anything ill by it, so that you clearly state to her that you were only intending to express love toward her. And then she gets to choose whether she's going to be mad about the truth or not. So with victims, there's a consistent pattern. You state what is true, and then you leave it up to them whether they want to choose to be happy or not happy. I recently had a friend, for example, who called and asked me, who had thought that I had said something to hurt her feelings. So she called and asked about it. And I said, no, quite the contrary. That wasn't what I'd said at all. I hadn't said anything even remotely like that. And she was still irritated. So I said, all right, so you thought I said that. You thought I said A, and it turns out I did not say A. I said B. So you now have a choice. You can continue to choose to believe a lie, which would seem kind of silly to me, but you can. So you can believe a lie or not. That's your first choice. And now, either way that you go, you can choose to be happy or be miserable. So it's up to you which choice that you make. But I just thought I would make the choices that you're making clear to you. And once she got it, she actually eventually chose to make the happy choice. But many victims won't. Many victims will still choose to be miserable, but at least then you get the choice, and you won't go down the victim path and feel responsible for the choices that she's making. This writer said, "My 5-year-old girl is in kindergarten, and several times now we have found toys in her room that didn't belong to her. To our horror, we have discovered that she has been stealing from her school." She's 5. "So we've had her return the toys to her teacher, and each time that we find the toy at home, she pitches an absolute fit about it. She screams about having to return the toy, and then she screams again that we make her tell her teacher about it because she's ashamed and knows that what she did was wrong. It's quite traumatic each time. So I've sat down with her and I've talked to her about it, and I've explained that taking this toy, it's just a couple of toys that she takes each time, and I've explained that it's wrong without making her feel bad. I don't yell at her. But then she does it again. And now I'm at a loss what to do about it." I'll bet. Now, some kids understand that a thing is wrong, and you explain that it's wrong, and then that's it. And then you're just done, and they get it. Other kids need to understand why a thing is wrong, and that helps them a whole lot. So it might be useful to explain to your kid, to the kleptomaniac here, why it's wrong. So explain to her that it hurts the other kids. And it might be helpful to her if you explain it to her in terms of her. So some kids have a better understanding if you explain how it would affect them. So you might say, so what would it be like if all the kids at school came over to our house over here and took your toys and took them home so that you couldn't use them? How would that feel? Or you might ask, shall we take all of your toys now? Shall we go pack up your toys and put them in a suitcase and take them to the kids at school so they can take them home so that you don't have any toys at home? I mean, really, shall we do that? Almost certainly she would say no. Probably she would be horrified. And you say, and why not? Because it would make you feel sad, unhappy, whatever. Do this so that she gets the feeling. I mean, make it realistic enough. Say, well, let's go pack up your toys. So that she goes, no, I would hate that. And you say, and that's why we don't take toys from other people. Because it affects other kids. It makes them unhappy. And when we make other people unhappy, it makes us unhappy too. That's why we don't do wrong things. We don't not do wrong things just because somebody says it's wrong, but because wrong things make us unhappy. So, do you understand that? Now, this is important. It's one thing to lecture a kid. Kids will listen to a lecture and agree with you just to get the lecture to be over. Surely you've caught on to that by now. Remember, she's 5 years old. And when Dad sits down to lecture her, she will just nod her little head, knowing that the faster she nods her head, the sooner you will shut up. They're not stupid. And so, after you've explained this to her, you then need to say, so now, why is it that you don't take toys from school? You need to ask her to explain it back to you. Because if she can't explain it back to you, she didn't hear one word you said. So you need to check and see if she gets it. Now, we're still not done. Then you explain to her what a consequence is. So you say to her, it's a long word, you say, but you say a consequence is like a price we pay. If we do a wrong thing, sometimes we have to pay a price. So you say, like, if Dad drives too fast on the road, then, and maybe she's been in the car when you've done this. This would be even better. If Dad drives too fast on the road, you say, have you noticed that there are police cars out on the road? then the policeman will pull me over and he'll give me a ticket, and I have to pay the ticket. I have to pay a price for driving too fast. And the reason is that it teaches me a lesson. It teaches me so that the next time I go to drive too fast, I'll remember. The next time I push my foot down too hard on the pedal, I'll go, do I really want to pay? And pull your wallet out. Kids are very visual. Pull your wallet out and you say, a ticket costs $120. And you pull out $120. You say, this is a lot of money. This would buy 4 of your toys, whatever it is. And you say, I would have to pay that if I drive too fast. And that's so that the next time I go to drive too fast, I'll go, I don't really want to pay this next time, so I won't drive too fast. And this is how it goes everywhere in life. We get consequences so that we won't do the wrong thing. So we're going to come up with a consequence for you, a price for you to pay if you take a toy again from school. You're going to have her attention right about now. She's going to be really listening to you because you probably haven't done much of this before. So you're going to say something like, so the next time you take a toy from school, what we'll do is you will not only have to take the toy back and tell Mrs. Smith that you've taken the toy, but we're going to take and you pick a toy that you know she really likes. We're going to take your Snuggly Bear that you really like, and we're going to take that in and donate it to the school so that you will remember not to take a toy again. And that right about now, her little eyes are going to go, wow. See, up to now, you haven't really given her a great big reason not to take a toy from school. And now you have. So it's a good little lesson to give our kids in consequences. Here's a reader who says, I would like some perspective on a situation. I'm fairly new to this and using it with my kids. My 14-year-old son drowns a lot. However, I'd like some advice on balancing the idea of no expectations from anyone with respect for myself. My 14-year-old is often verbally abusive, choosing to call me things like effing B and many variations on a daily basis when he is asked to do something or when we are generally interacting. That's fairly aggressive from a 14-year-old to his mother. I also understand the 3 choices of live with it and love it, live with it and hate it, and leave it. Yeah, it's pretty hard to leave your 14-year-old. But in our situation, leaving is not an option. He doesn't have a place to go with his father's family. We're divorced. So, I'd like to know how to handle this situation in a real love way, honoring him and his process of drowning while maintaining my own needs for respectful language and someday a loving interaction with him. You're going to need a lot of support with this. My guess is that if you're asking me this question, you've probably not gotten a whole lot of support from people in the real love community. So you're going to need to be on conference calls and talking to people in the real love community like on a daily basis. If you're taking this kind of language from your 14-year-old son, you're not feeling very loved. And that's just tragic. So you need a lot of support, not a little bit, kid. If you're taking this kind of language, that's terrible. So first, you got to get more love, way more. Like, whew. That's the main thing. Because if you don't feel more loved, none of this is going to work. you're obviously terrified of your kid. You're afraid of your own 14-year-old son. If you weren't afraid of your own boy, there's no way he'd use this language with you. It's obvious that he just runs over you. And he knows he can do it. He knows he can get away with it every day. And this has to stop. This has to stop not so that you'll be respected, but because this is destroying this kid. You see? If this kid grows up thinking that he can treat you this way, guess how he's going to treat everybody else? He's going to treat his girlfriends this way. He's going to treat other people in his life this way. He's going to treat his wife this way. He's going to treat his kids this way. This is horrifying. This kid's going to end up in prison. Not exaggerating. So, we don't punish children for being angry. If the kid's mad, he's mad. So you don't say to a kid, you can't be mad at me. And you say, how do we balance no expectations with respect for yourself? Well, you don't expect the kid to have respect for you, and you don't expect the kid to love you. But an angry child who's lashing out, like this kid is doing, is destroying himself. And there are things that he cannot do in his life and be happy. So if you love him, if you want to keep him from destroying himself, you have to begin to love him and teach him. And you may need, well, you will need, daily support from people who understand real love fairly well in order to work with this child. If you try to do this by yourself, this kid's just going to run over you like a bulldozer, which is what he's doing now. So if he's angry, which he obviously is, and he comes at you calling you effing this and effing that, his being angry is understandable. I get that, and it's okay. If he's angry, whatever. But he cannot use that kind of language. Why? Because it's an assault. In most places, using this kind of language in public is actually a crime. It's a crime. It's a misdemeanor. He can be put in jail. And so he doesn't get to assault you with it at home either, because home is a practice for every place else. So you need to talk to him about it immediately. And so when he says whatever he says, effing this or whatever, you need to immediately say, so, Fred, clearly you're angry. Tell me exactly what you're angry about and tell it to me in English. Well, I am telling you in effing English. No, no, you're not. What you're doing is you are using assaulting, aggressive, and unacceptable language, which you would not be able to use at school. You would be suspended. Which you would not be able to use at work. You would be fired. Which you would not be able to use on the streets. You'd be put in jail. So you can't use that language anywhere else, and you can't use it here. And if you continue to use it here, there will be consequences for it here. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to teach you a better way of expressing your anger. If you're angry, I understand. You've been absolutely ruined by the way you've been raised by me, the way you've been raised by your father. You've not gotten the love and the upbringing that you deserve. My fault. I get that. Then tell me that you're angry about that. But you don't get to continue to use that language. And so, but you've got to be able to tell it to him just this calmly. If he continues to use that language, only if you can tell it to him this calmly, then what you say is, the way that everybody is taught in real life is that if they can't understand the lesson with words, then they have to be taught with consequences. And the purpose of being taught with consequences is so that the next time they go to use a particular behavior, they will remember the consequence and be less likely to use the behavior. So, if you'd like, you can help me choose the consequence. But there will be consequences chosen. We will, for example, remove your leisure privileges, remove your use of the computer, remove your right to go out and play with friends, remove your ability to be transported from here to the mall. Whatever it is, you know what it is he likes to do. I'm not there, I don't know. Play video games, whatever. I would prefer that you get to do those things. I don't want to remove any of your privileges. I want you to have them all. But in order for you to have them, you can't use that language because you're assaulting with words in just as real a way as assaulting with your fists. And you don't get to do that. So you can be angry. Tell me that you're just furious, that you hate the way you've been raised, that you don't like this place, that you feel criticized, that you're... Go ahead and tell me all those things. But you don't get to use these words. And if you keep it up, we'll continue the restrictions, and eventually if you become incorrigible enough, if you don't like this place enough, they have room in the youth detention center, in the youth version of jail. And they'll put kids in jail who don't listen to their parents consistently enough. So if you want to, I would hate that particular option for you, but prison is one of the options. And I've helped a number of parents go all the way to that consequence. If you hate it here enough, and you don't like your room here, we'll see if you like your cot in a room where there are 64 cots of kids at the youth detention center. And we'll see how you fit in that pecking order. Where the boys use that language with you all night long where you can't sleep. We'll see if you like that better. But you have to be able to say it this calmly. And understand that you impose the consequences only so that he'll learn that he can't use those words, but he can be as angry as he wishes. Next writer. For 12 years, I was married to Fred, and I thought I was the luckiest gal on the planet. For the next 11 years, after I was divorced, I've been semi-miserable. I see that these are two sides of the same coin, trading imitation love. Pretty smart of you. So knowing what I know, because I know a little bit about your ex, you understand what happened then and what's happened since pretty well. He was wealthy. He was powerful. He used people to perfection. I happen to know who her ex was. He used you. He used your daughter. He played people like a violin to get everything he could out of them for himself. Even when he appeared to be giving to people, what he was doing was giving to them only to the extent that he could get something out of them for him. And when people didn't give him what he wanted, then he would just grab them and wring it out of them, and beat it out of them, emotionally speaking. So he was an angry, manipulative, controlling human being, and had no idea what it was like to just actually unconditionally love anybody. Now, why was he able to do that with you? Because he was obviously manipulative, obviously controlling, and he would not have been able to do that with just anybody. He was able to do it with you because you had been perfectly prepared in your childhood in a family where you had already been trained to beg for imitation love. So you were already prepared for him. So when he came along and said, stand up and dance for imitation love, you did. So you were already prepared for this dance. And now, since the divorce, you're having to completely retrain yourself to find real love in a world where imitation love is pretty much the standard everywhere you go. And that's a tough thing. That's a tough thing to essentially speak an entirely foreign language in a world where almost everybody speaks a language called imitation love. It's an odd thing. It makes you an odd duck. Everywhere we go, people speak imitation love. Turn on the television and watch people. And everybody is selling imitation love. Every commercial sells imitation love. If you will drink this beer, if you will buy this truck, if you will wear this perfume, if you will wear this dress, if you will behave in this way, then you will have the imitation love that will make you happy. That's the purpose of almost every single commercial there is, and it's the way that people behave in television programs, on movies, and so on. In the preparation that I do for promoting real love on talk shows, for example, sometimes I'll watch talk shows to see what's the prevailing popular wisdom, and the things that people teach as wisdom is horrifying. The things that people are taught, for example, to put out to attract partners. I watched a program today, and it was enough to make you run screaming from the room, tearing your hair from its roots. It was sell yourself. Sell yourself falsely, tell lies, manipulate your partner, and trick your partner in every possible way. And as the host, who was a comedian, who had written a best-selling book on Oprah, as the host sold these lies, the audience cheered in approval. So it's a very strange language that we're now teaching. And what you're noting is that it's a tough thing. Like you're describing, you've been semi-miserable, and now you're having to just completely retrain. It's a tough deal. Now you're saying, how do I unconditionally love my former husband? How am I still conditionally loving him? May be a better question. Can you give me some specific things to do and not to do? Ways to think about this and not to think about that? Kind of a general question. I'm getting more free of this demon because of the Real Love program and would like to unhook a lot more. Something I've been wanting to ask you for 3 years. I can't wait. Do you unconditionally love your ex-wife now? And what does that look like? How do you think, feel, act differently about your ex-wife, mother of your ex-children, compared to Donna, or really anyone for that matter? So, why do we marry our partners? Almost invariably in the beginning, we marry them because of the imitation love that they give us. So why do we divorce our ex-partners? Because of the imitation love that wears off, and then we become bitter and feel betrayed. So how do we lose that bitterness? It's about learning to see our ex-partners differently and realize that they really never had, from the very beginning, what we were looking for. What we really wanted in the beginning was real love. Well, they never had it. And frankly, from the very beginning, we never had it either, and really didn't even know we were looking for it. Now, we were, that's what we wanted, but because we didn't know what it was, we settled for imitation love. So it was every bit as much our fault as theirs. Every bit as much. So to be angry at our ex-partners for anything that went wrong in our marriage is kind of stupid. So you say, so how do I feel toward my ex-partner? Well, how could I possibly feel any bitterness or anything negative toward a partner who did her best? Was she unconditionally loving? Well, I'm not still married to her, so that kind of answers that question, doesn't it? And what kind of mistakes did she make? None of my business. None of my business. People ask me, so why did you get divorced? It's been many years ago now. But why did I get divorced? Because I wasn't loving enough. Because if I had been sufficiently unconditionally loving then, had I known then what I know now, I'd still be married to her. I would. So, whose fault was it? mine. It's kind of inescapable, isn't it? So despite whatever flaws she might have had I been sufficiently loving, we'd still be married. So whose fault? My fault. What flaws did she have? Who cares? None of my business, and if it's none of my business, certainly none of yours. So, not worth talking about. So how do I feel? Oh, it was a great time of learning. We don't talk a lot. We had 22 years, to work stuff out, and didn't. When I do see her, I don't have any negative feelings whatever toward her. We raised 5 great kids together. We see each other occasionally, but gosh, there's no bitterness whatever. So, how do you work it out with an ex-partner? What part of X are you having a hard time with? It was a partner that you once shared a life with. It's a partner with whom you made innumerable mistakes, or it wouldn't be an ex-partner. It's a partner that you now get to learn to unconditionally care about their happiness. But that doesn't mean that you have to spend a lot of time with that person, because they are your ex-partner. But if you spend any time going, what should I have done? Or what could I do now? That's kind of ridiculous, because it's, like you said, an ex-partner. So we spend a lot of time worried about what we did wrong in the past with ex-partners, and what should we have done, and all of that. And the main thing is to learn from those mistakes and apply them to the relationships we have in the present, not just with our present partners, but with everybody. And to forgive ourselves for the mistakes we made, to forgive our partners, and move on. And our lives would be a great deal happier. So it's been really fun answering the questions that were sent in. I look forward to getting your questions in the coming week. We're going to be in Phoenix next Tuesday. So please send in your questions again to greg@reallove.com. We're going to do our show from Phoenix next Tuesday. It'll be from a different location, different backdrop for a change. And we look forward to doing that. So send in your questions and we'll answer them same old way, just different spot. And in the meantime, remember that it's always about real love. We'll see you then. Bye.